Do What Works essentially has an engine that can look at any A/B test done on the web based on public data. We essentially look at what brands are testing, and then we look at what versions those brands keep on their sites. We then aggregate it at scale with an incredible amount of specialization. So to give you guys a specific example, during the year 2025, we saw that 1,326 tested logo bars. That's actually a real stat that we have inside of our database. Hey, we looked at 1,326 tests around logos. Usually they seem to lose in testing. Here's why they typically seem to lose, and here's the alternatives that seem to perform better. Over a 12-month period, my profile does somewhere between like 8 to 10 million views on average. One of the reasons I think my content has been by far the most business impactful it's ever been, I've leaned heavily into trying to own the category. I talk very little about Do What Works. I try to talk a lot about website best practices and try to be a leading voice in website best practices. So I'm trying to own the category. Okay, this is busy as all get out. Okay.
Welcome to Marketing by Design, where you and I learned from our favorite founders and marketers on how they built their success and told their stories by design. I am your host, Andy Milligan. Let's get started.
I have been in B2B SaaS, like software as an industry, for basically my entire career, for like 15 years. I have not always been in marketing. So I did not start in marketing. I actually started in sales. So all the way back in college, I was interning at a company, Tech Validate, that got acquired by SurveyMonkey. Back then was like SDR, starting at the very bottom in terms of the sales function. Then went in, became an AE, worked for a company called Entreport, was basically handling inbound sales stuff. And during that time, someone had said something, I'm trying to remember the exact way that it started, but someone from marketing was chatting with me and they said something about Quora. They're like, hey, we're trying to break into Quora as a new channel and we're trying to think of different approaches. And I said, well, I can hop on there and I can talk about being a salesperson, like different ways that I'm pitching people, different creative ideas I've had to, basically get calls lined up. And so I did that. And within about 2 months, I had 1 million views on Quora. And that was like way more reach than our marketing team had ever gotten, like repurposing blog content. And they were like, that's crazy. Like, what else can you do on kind of the marketing side? And so that kind of like started to get me unofficially into that marketing bucket. At the same time, I launched a game, a physical card game on Kickstarter called Archon. We 800% funded. We sold over $100,000 worth of product within a 12-month period. And that was one of my first forays also into marketing from an execution standpoint. I built the website. I did the sales. I hopped on the podcast and talked about the product. I went to the physical events. I did the play testing. So kind of end to end, I was stepping into those shoes of actually being a marketer for something that I owned. Now, in this case, an e-commerce product versus a software product. But it was the combination, I think, of getting my feet wet in Quora, starting on that as a new channel, as well as launching Archon during that period that really kind of got me interested. From there, I took a role as head of growth at a startup called Bonjoro, which was basically a video email startup, and started getting our team on a bunch of podcasts, finding kind of new levers of growth. And, Quora was kind of fading out a little bit. Quora is like a channel that, was really, really hot. I think it was like 2016 to 2019 maybe. And then it kind of like took a dip. So I started I started finding basically new levers and new things to lean into during my time at Bonjoro. Towards the end of my time at Bonjoro, a company called Active Campaign, which was much larger, around 250 million a year, basically was starting to see a lot of my content on LinkedIn. And they were like, hey, we're really interested in opening up new kind of like demand gen channels. We're thinking about demand generation differently. And we want like a practitioner. We want someone who isn't just strategy, but is like in the trenches, actually shipping and driving business and demand. So they brought me on and essentially I ran a couple core functions. I ran our influencer program, which probably could be a whole episode in and of itself. Tons of learnings from that. We worked with millions of dollars in budget and dozens of influencers. And I think I learned a ton there. But we also stood up an organic internal program. So it was not just me. One of the things that was really important is I wanted to expand this across our team. And that was always a big question. Like, how do you activate your team? How do you get people sharing content? How do you do it in a way that's meaningful to the business and actually drives growth? And so we stood up a LinkedIn program and we started, basically building a footprint there. And we also experimented with a couple new channels. We started ranking a bunch in Reddit. We got a ton. I forget ultimately whether it was like I want to say it was like 40 to 50 of our top search results were ranking page one under the forum section for Active Campaign and everything related to email and that kind of world. So Active Campaign, I was kind of standing up some of these kind of new original challenges. And then today, I work at a company called Do What Works, which is a really interesting and cool technology and also kind of perfect for a content marketer. But that kind of came about
Mm-hmm.
because they essentially were like, do you want to own the whole thing, right? Like end to end, all the functions in kind of like a high growth startup environment. And then when they kind of told me about the product and where they were at, I was like, that sounds super interesting. That sounds fascinating. And I kind of came in about almost a year ago exactly to this new role and basically have been growing stuff. And what's fascinating too is the
Mm-hmm.
power of LinkedIn and that channel. So over a 12-month period, my profile does somewhere between like 8 to 10 million views on average. We
Mm-hmm.
target the enterprise. So our customers are, people like Adobe and people like Twilio, these like large companies in the enterprise sphere. And we drive 30 to 40% of business closed directly from LinkedIn. So LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
is a massive contributor of our closed business. And it was really cool to go from SMB world, which is where I've kind of cut my teeth. That's where I spent most of my career. Bonjoro was
Mm-hmm.
SMB focused, Active Campaign was SMB focused, Entreport was
Yeah.
SMB focused. To took this leap up to enterprise and to see that it still applied. These
Hmm.
earned media channels, this kind of like distribution mindset, which is something that I really believe in is core to kind of my marketing philosophy, which is that like as a brand, you need to have a distribution plan. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what these channels are, right? Your podcast, your newsletter, your presence on LinkedIn. These are all ways to distribute. It applied
Mm-hmm.
in both SMB and in the enterprise world, which was pretty cool to see. So that's a little bit
Yeah,
of the journey there.
dude, so much I want to pick apart from there. So, um, one of the questions you kind of canceled out was what I was going to ask is like, what are the biggest differences you learned from more startup type marketing and SMB targeted account marketing to where you are now, where you're targeting enterprise? But I'll table that for now. Um, I want to zoom in a little more and talk about your content personally. So, you mentioned you've done hundreds of podcasts. You also done newsletter side, which is the majority of the content I read about you is the newsletter on Substack. And you said when you started, you were also writing long form, or you were writing on Quora, which is also, from my understanding, like longer form articles. If you had to be like self aware, what would you say like your most natural content expression piece is, and how have you leveraged that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the way that I kind of think about it. So first off, I love writing. Right? Like
Mm,
writing is a passion of mine. Someday I might just drop all of this and just write fiction books, right?
mhm,
So writing is definitely a medium that I really enjoy. I tend to like longer form. It's why I never really found my identity on like X because it's just like I wasn't the
mm,
type to like distill it into these little bites. LinkedIn is like right on the border. I use LinkedIn and it's worked well for me. I often find that I write a post and then I edit, chop it down.
yeah.
I think there's probably a fair argument to say that my content might even perform better if I made it a little bit shorter. But
Mhm,
that's definitely something I enjoy. But I also really like podcasts because there's this back and forth exchange. You get to meet different experts and people in your industry, and you get to just have nice back and forth conversations. And so I really like that as well. What I tend to
mhm.
try to do is to use content. I think some people don't like the word like redistribute because it maybe like
Yeah,
cheapens it a little
repurpose.
bit, but whatever terminology you want to use. The idea is to like take those core ideas that you're investing time in, that you're doing firsthand research, that you're producing those insights, and see where you can kind of populate those in different places. And a big, not to
Mhm,
like jump ahead, but a big breakthrough for me this year. And but
mhm,
one of the ways I'm doing it is I'm doing it through conversations on other brands specifically focused on a couple things. Number one is novelty. Novelty, I've realized, works really, really well on social platforms, and it works
mhm,
even a lot better than what provides the best conversion lift. So, what I mean by that specifically is
hmm,
if I find a company that's doing something creative around AI, hey, in their footer, they have like a summarize with AI button, and this is the flow, and
mhm,
this is how you could do it. People haven't seen that. They're like, that's interesting. Right.
mhm,
Now, from an actual impact is the 0.6% of your web traffic that gets to the bottom and potentially clicks on that button, like is it a hugely impactful thing on the website? No, not nowhere close to as impactful as the image you have on the top or your call to action button or things like that. But what I've experienced is people are drawn in by the novelty, And then you can feed more of those best practices afterwards. When I lead with
Uh-huh.
content where I'm like, I looked at 7,000 tests about this type of image versus this type of video in the hero, people just aren't that interested. I've never had,
Uh-huh.
for me personally, I've never had that content go viral. I've never had that content create massive inbound demand. I
Uh-huh.
think that to me, social is the top. It's the awareness layer. It's to bring people into the fold, and novelty I found is the best way to do that. And then
Uh-huh.
from there, you can get into more of the best practices. But the other side of it is because I'm always talking about other brands, I'm bringing them into the distribution part, right? So I'm having the other brands who are sharing, they're putting it in their newsletter, they're distributing it. And a lot of
Uh-huh.
times, what I do is instead of doing a post about a company and then immediately sharing it with the company and being like, hey, you should go check this out, I actually wait 2 to 3 days. And what I do is I let the post get a little viral naturally. And then I go to them and I say, hey, this has 40,000 views. Just wanted to share it with you guys, throw you guys some love. And when I
Uh-huh.
do it that way, I almost always get
Uh-huh.
replies from high up executives. And I'm talking to the top companies in the space. I'm talking to the Lovables. I'm talking to the Replets, the Twilios,
Uh-huh.
like all the top companies. And very, very rarely, 1 out of 50 times, do I not hear back from like high level people within these organizations because it's something that's just like blatantly valuable to them, which is like attention on their assets.
Uh-huh.
It's valuable to my customers because I'm doing it from a way of like highlighting something unique, interesting. It's giving them inspiration or thoughts, at least things to think about, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
and so it creates this very virtuous cycle. And then what
Yeah.
actually has happened, we have 8 companies that have paid money to promote the content afterwards. So they come in and they're like, I love this. Can I put $1,000 a month to promote it? I'm like, amazing, right? It's just a win win. I get more attention on my
Mhm.
profile, and they see what they get is an insanely efficient Facebook ad. So
Mhm.
this is a whole other conversation on CPMs, but people might run ads to their bottom of funnel thing and they get an $80 CPM. These kind of posts are going to get a $5 CPM. Insanely
Right.
efficient CPM because the post got 400,000 views organically. So it's the algorithm loves that type of content. It's not promotional. It's like they already know it performs well. So
Mhm.
that balance works.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I would imagine, and that was kind of like answering the next question I had is like the biggest difference between like SMB marketing versus targeting enterprises is that last step of actually creating some of the content around those people directly and then sharing it with them. That is not something I've ever heard another CMO or other people doing the marketing functions in their own company actively think about. I don't think they think that far ahead. I think they're like marketers traditionally are very behind the eight ball, always just trying to meet a content deadline schedule. And they're not thinking like, okay, if this content has a desired effect, what are the benefits of that? What do I do next? How do I capitalize on it? Um, that is really cool, man. And I'm seeing it kind of come together just from following you for a long time. One thing I did want to say too, based on what you just said, is I would almost compare you to. I got to talk to Anthony Perry about 6 months ago, and I would almost compare you to be like the Fletch of like web design and best practices because you have, like you said, own the category and you have a content format expression that's very native to you. Like a lot of your best performing posts, I feel like have, and the audience can go look like a repeatable format where you say like XYZ company. I've never seen another company do what XYZ company is doing. And then you lead with the hook and then there's like a downward arrow and it points to a graphic that illustrates that. Um, Sean Purry, he's the host of My First Meal, and he has this expression where it's like when you talk about like what does well on different platforms and like experimenting with novelty. He has the expression of like a grizzly bear is not exceptional. A tricycle is not exceptional, but a grizzly bear riding a tricycle, now that's something you like stop and take notes at, right? When you see content that's like not native to the platform that ends up doing really well, that's like a grizzly bear riding a tricycle. It's like something you stop and double take at. And I imagine, especially too, when companies see their own brand being manifested and they're getting attention to the things that only their team is talking about internally, I imagine too, there's probably some people that are on the team that are like, hey, I told you that was going to work. And they're like going back and forth with each other and like, yeah, we can see. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's really
a
cool.
hundred. Yeah, 100%. Like I think I did a post recently about MongoDB having like an experience selector where you can choose a developer version or like a business leader version at the top of the website. and it got a
Mhm.
lot of momentum. And one of the things I heard when I connected with the team was the people that own the site were just like, they felt really appreciated by that. We're like, thank you. Like we spent like
Yeah.
we spent all this time building all these pages, building all these pieces, and they felt elevated through that. And it also ties to something like someone asked me recently, they said, why don't you do teardowns? Like teardowns are really interesting. You can have someone come
Yeah.
on, you tear down a page, you critique it. I'm like, totally. Teardowns are a really interesting format and people can get a lot out of them. But there's one fundamental challenge that I found. So this is for me personally, not generalizing. I'm sure some people are crushing with it. But when you do a tear down, how often are the brands that you are tearing down helping with distribution? Back to
Right.
distribution mindset, right? Like you're going to look at
Mhm.
a website, say there's three things that they do really poorly and there's three things they do really well. You have a choice. You could do a tear down and you could go through both. And I think that is valuable to the people who are consuming it. But
Mhm.
if you talk about these are three best practices, that still has interest to folks. And now the team is distributing it and they're adding all of that extra energy to have their team publishing it out. And if you're enterprise focused, enterprise is relationship based. This is the
Mhm.
world of relationships. So what are you doing that is helping you build relationships? Like when we were like, hey, we want to do more fintech companies. Within a couple months, we had built connections with Rippling, with Brex, with Navan, with Chime, with Sage. Like name all the major fintechs. I was connected with executives of every single one of those in a couple months because I went to their websites and I found things that were good and I highlighted it. I got momentum and then I shared it out with
Mhm.
them. Right. So
Mhm.
I'm not telling people like don't be critical of anything. But what I am saying is that if your focus is on getting distribution and reach and building relationships, think about what is going to help you build that relationship and what is going to help you give that reach. And I have found that the positive framing or focusing on the positives versus the negatives has been more effective for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to have a second conversation with someone when you talk shit about their website. Like I everyone who sees a website is a website critic. And that's the thing those are things that make me lose sleep at night too, is because there's like so many small things that everyone is seeing. And there's a lot of validation that the team probably feels when you're calling out the things that they did good. And that it's that are very in the weeds that they, get validation for. Um, what then I want to talk about too is how did you kind of land on the concept of doing a newsletter in tandem with? I'm kind of dissecting your funnel in my time as the audience can look. You have a newsletter that goes out. Is it once monthly or biweekly? When is it?
Once a week, actually,
Once a week,
every
and you
Thursday.
have news every Tuesday. Yep. When so talk to me about like your content creation process and how everything works. I've seen you on webinars, I've seen you doing podcasts, and you have a newsletter. How do you mentioned repurposing content a little bit there. I want to talk about your process for that. How do you think about your content ecosystem as a whole? And do you have a process for meeting deadlines and making sure the quality stays high?
Yeah. So first, just to emphasize, like we're a startup, we're a lean team, and a lot of the actual like writing itself is done by me. So
Hmm.
that is on the social side as well as in the newsletter side. I have designers and people that help with like composition and other parts, but that's just a note on that. I really the newsletter for me is twofold. Primarily, it's a way to expand. So as I kind of noted, we hook people in with novelty. But one of the challenges we have is like I've built this footprint of connecting people to do what works as like a best practice. But a lot of people have no idea what we actually are. Are we an agency? Like
Hmm.
what is do what works? And so first off, maybe I'll pause, explain what do what works is, and then we could talk about how that kind of feeds into the newsletter. So do what works essentially has an engine that can look at any A/B test done on the web based on public data. We're not doing anything black hat or sketchy. This is all based on public data. But we essentially look at what brands are testing and then we look at what versions those brands keep on their sites. We then aggregate it at scale with an incredible amount of specialization. So, to give you guys a specific example, we might look and say during the year 2025, we saw that 1,326 brands tested logo bars. That's actually a real stat that we have inside of our database. So we look and we say, okay, of all those brands that tested logo bars, who kept the logo bars? Who didn't keep them? Did people move them around to different spots? Did it matter if a logo bar is on the homepage or on the pricing page? And what were the representations of those logo bars that seemed to be more effective and that people kept? We take all of those variables and then we basically provide that to customers. So someone who's looking at redesigning their website, setting up a page, and they want to make a data informed decision, right? Beyond the anecdotal experience of their internal team, they can come to us as a platform and we can help share that. Like in your
Mhm.
specific niche, on your specific page type, for your specific company size and your specific geo, does this thing tend to work? Right. And so that's essentially what we do. And that overall, that test data is something that we often expand on in the newsletter. So give you guys a perfect example. Last week, I talked about 3 logo designs that are really high performing. And I actually chatted with all these teams behind them, and they gave me a lot of awesome firsthand data. We shared that out. That content did well, right? My
Mhm.
plan this week in our newsletter is to take that, but to expand on the do what works data we have. So I'll probably take that post, which is
Mhm.
pretty concise. It's like, these are 3 approaches, and this is why they're good. In our newsletter, I'll explain the broader context. What I just said to you, hey, we looked at 1,326 tests around logos. Usually they seem to lose in testing. Here's why they typically seem to lose. And here's the alternatives that seem to perform better, right?
Mhm.
And in the newsletter, I have the amount of space to really extrapolate and to show people that, as well as share specific test data. Here's Dropbox running a test with a logo bar and without a logo bar. Without a logo bar one on their pricing page, and here's why we think that is, et cetera, et cetera,
Mhm.
et cetera.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the
Yeah.
idea of taking people through the funnel in that sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like you kind of validate on LinkedIn with short form, and then what performs well, you can then double down on, and also what you have conjoining the data that you do have to back it up and go more deep with the newsletters. Um, I can see that, and I've talked to a lot of marketers that do similar things. Is validating when there's less risk and less time that goes into creating the content. CEO gets a good response, sees what's generating like signals of intent from ICP, and that's when you really go deep in the newsletter. Um, I want to talk a little bit about something that not a lot of marketers talk about these days, um, AI, and how. Sorry, that was a joke. What do you see, like zooming out to like websites as a whole? Personally, I spend a lot of time just looking at a lot of websites, inspiration, best practices. You've been my mentor on that. Um, but just as someone who's spending a lot of time seeing the actual data in terms of what's working, what do you see the website experience to be heading towards maybe this time next year, this time in 2 years? There's a lot. Obviously, it's a big topic of contention. In between you and I don't think anyone knows like 100% for sure what it's going to look like. But do you ever see, like, how do you see the marketer to website? Obviously, it's very context dependent based on company size, available resources, etc. But all in all, how do you see the marketer to website relationship changing? Is it something that's going to be, platform agnostic? Is it something that's going to be we have a change we need to make? How are marketers going to approach redesigns? How are marketers going to approach working the website into other campaigns? And is there any data or small signals that you've seen that maybe incline your answer one way or the other?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces of that. So I'm going to try to attack it
Mhm.
from a couple different angles. And I'll also note that there's things that we have a lot of data around, and then there's things that we don't because it's kind of predictive of the future, right?
Right.
So for one of the things, for example, is if you ask me, what do I think websites are going to look like in 5 years in the SaaS and fintech space, which I kind of like know best, I think
Mhm.
we are absolutely moving towards a lovable type of relationship with the website. What do I mean by that? When you go to Lovable, it says like, we help you build apps and websites, and there's a little entry box, and you tell it what you want to do. But the key is once you tell it what you want to do, it follows up and it asks you more information, right? So like if you go to the website and you say, I want to do XYZ, it's like, okay, but how do you want to think about this, 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 this? It has a back and forth. It's like a workflow, right? And you keep
Mhm.
clarifying, you keep clarifying, you keep clarifying, and then you hit go. And I imagine these huge websites. I work with a lot of enterprise companies. They have these huge websites, tons of stuff, thousands of pages buried in their top nav and their bottom footer, right?
The website is live. Now is when the real work starts. While it's never been easier to build a website, the same is also true that it's never been harder to make a website actually work hard for you. Across our work on hundreds of projects and working with dozens of marketing teams, what we found is that before we start, the website is often the slowest moving part. But that doesn't have to be the case. Digital ink is never dry. The moment your website launches is the best opportunity that you have to make it effective and drive marketing qualified leads month after month after month. Most marketers are acting blind. They just don't know who's going to their website. They don't have visibility to see what pages, what specific actions, and how long they're spending on each page. All of these are high intent signals of your warmest prospects. Over the past several years, we've worked so hard to put together a strategy that lets us not just see who these people are, but specifically track what actions they're taking on your website and give you those insights on a silver platter. What we find hilarious is that as marketers, we're so diligent on showing up every single day, always posting to social, making ourselves as visible as possible. And yet, our most visible and high converting, trust gaining asset sitting at the bottom of that funnel is maintained the least. Having a good website is the foundation for all of this opportunity. And if you're not investing marketing efforts into it month after month, your most profitable asset is being lazy. If spending time in the weeds, looking through data, and connecting these insights to the rest of your marketing is not your jam, if your website is being lazy, let's have a conversation.
And
Mm-hmm.
everyone who hits a website typically has some sort of intent. They have a mission, they have something that they want to do, right? So, this idea that you could ask exactly what you want and it would curate a customized website experience that's 100% personalized to your exact intent. Here's where I'm coming from. Here's the tech that I use right now. Here's what I'm trying to do. And it just curates that website for you. Instead of showing you an entire integration section, it just shows you the integrations that are relevant to you. Instead of showing you all the pricing stuff because you gave it context on your company size or some parameters, it shows you those relevant pieces. Like, it would be entirely customized and tailored. I think that is the state that we're heading to down the line. That's my best prediction. Now, what I'll say is, in the interim, we see a lot of very interesting data trend. That is a little bit speculative because I don't have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
data point to show you companies that are doing that, right? That's just like
Mm-hmm.
my opinion about where I think AI is evolving and how it's going to impact that experience. What I do
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of data behind is Carta just redid their website, moved their persona section all the way to the top, right under their hero. Mongo redid their website, I think it was like 8-9 months ago, added an experience selector at the top for more customization.
Mm-hmm.
Sage just redid the website, same thing. I can go on and on and on. What we're seeing is more and more brands leaning into a persona based segmentation in a robust way. Meaning,
Mm-hmm.
who are you exactly? Like, what is your function? And how does that function, like, how can we tailor that experience? And to drill a level deeper, I did a
Mm-hmm.
really interesting, I had a series of really interesting conversations with a bunch of different brands where they shared. I asked them, what gets the most clicks, engagements, and funnel on your website? Is it segmentation by industry? Is it by job function? Is it by use case? I went through all the categories. What was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting is what won out, what was the most effective was their specific role. That was more effective than industry. That was even more effective than use case. I thought that was very interesting. And I think it shows that it is the headspace of the person actually landing on their site, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
a product marketer, a VP of product marketing, they care about something very specific as a VP of product marketing, which is totally different from, the CFO. And so it seems that more and more sites are realizing the power of that path and they're optimizing for that type of segmentation, and that's moving up and that's becoming more and more prominent on websites, and more
Mm-hmm.
companies are testing into when they run A/B tests. They say this section is really really valuable. We're going to move it way up to the top. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I just had a conversation with the website team over at Glean, which is a $7 billion B2B SaaS company. And that's exactly what he shared with me, by the way. Like, he's like, under our solution section, we segment in a couple different ways. Job function team is by far the most effective. And in fact, it was so effective, we now have it right below the hero, like a hero, and then straight into our segmentation section on the actual homepage itself. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there'll be some interim steps, but that's my prediction of kind of like where we're heading and what we're going to see more of on websites is that
Yeah.
personalization in a robust way.
Yeah, man. Part of me tells me, well, I have two reactions to that. Part of it is like the best practices of like marketing as a whole are more important than ever, which is like knowing your customer, obviously, and being able to speak very one to one with them. But also just the totally novel concept of like the website assembles itself based on who is coming to it. Um, that is really interesting. I know you made a post about that. I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago. Um, of like your trends for websites in 2027. Um, I think it's tough because there's a version of it like when someone comes to a website, someone at a marketing function is coming to a website for the first time with purchase intent or just with informational learning intent, it's you need to be able to speak to them in a way that's like flattering to them almost, or else it's very, and I'm going to expand on that because it can have a couple different meanings. But people identify with not more than just a job title. They want to be spoken to in a way like they feel validated. So like if a product marketer goes to a website, they don't want to be called a product marketer because then they feel like they're being marketed to. They want to know then it feels more like a sales conversation than more like an actual demo or something that they're opting into. I think, like I said, knowing the audience is going to be more important than ever, and also the benefits that are most important to them and matching that, displaying that in the right point for them on the website in their exploration phase, almost like addressing objections like as they're having them live on the page. I think it's going to be really interesting to where websites can get to be like intuitive enough to where you can like really like forecast the journey of each person before they get there, if that makes sense. And also like working with like other marketing functions, you can think, okay, maybe this person has opened just through like other pixels or tracking, like this person has opened our newsletter and now they're coming to our website. Maybe they see a different version with that context in place. Um, or maybe they've been following our LinkedIn or our founder's profile for 6 months to a year. So we're already aware of where they're at, like in the buyer journey. They see a different headline or something that would appeal more to them, knowing that they're closer to the sale or at the bottom of the funnel. I think that's things that obviously I'm learning and thinking about, but it's hard to portray what that would look like just from a software and dev perspective. Like we're talking right now, it was about a month ago that like the big like people are calling it like the iPhone moment of Claude Code has really started to be very high performing. Is there anything that you've been experimenting with AI wise, either off on hours or off hours, that maybe you're excited about or maybe want to share?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's so many different ways when we talk about like AI, right? There's so many
Hmm.
people that are like, there's the vibe coding, there's the Claude code, there's so many different buckets. I have really tried to focus in pretty heavily in my AI applications in like this niche of websites. So I've been going very deep, for example, on like GEO, generative engine optimization, what shows up in LLMs, running tests, running experimentations, running, all sorts of different things to try to gain as much kind of knowledge and like firsthand data in that world specifically. And I use
Hmm.
LLMs on a daily basis. And so like, and I compare those across different, I compare the outputs of Claude versus ChatGPT versus Gemini versus what have you.
Hmm.
Um, but really like my focus has been like very, very specialized in that sense. I think like a lot of marketers, myself, and I encourage my team, like we practice and we test a lot of different tools and kind of a prototyping. Like I used to do way back in a
Hmm.
past life back in college, I did a lot of 3D printing and prototyping, right? I think of the replets and the bolts and the lovables in that kind of application, right? Let me prototype a page, let me prototype an app, let me prototype a flow of what this might look like before we take it into the product team. Let me prototype a lead magnet. So we do stuff like that, and we use those
Hmm.
tools that I just mentioned. A Lovable is the one that I most commonly use myself.
Hmm.
Um, but really, like my thought is that in this current moment with marketing, I feel like everyone that I talk to, like, it seems like there's this rush to all the same lanes. What I mean by that is like everyone is like, how do I use AI agents in this specific application? Like, how do I use Claude Code? How do I use, the Lovables to like do prototyping? And there's utility in that. But what I also think is that the specialization, like people that develop specialized domain expertises as a byproduct of that, I think that's going to be really valuable. And so I think there is
Hmm.
utility in the people that are going deep in a specific area. And
Hmm.
so again, that's kind of what I've been trying my best to do.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of practical day-to-day things that I think it's logical to use AI to just like expedite your processes. And there's lots of great tech out there. We could have a whole episode on like the tech that you can plug into different parts of that function.
Hmm.
But my focus around GEO, my focus around like with websites specifically, how can you use it? Like what type of experiments on websites are around AI are effective? What kind of messaging around AI is effective? What kind of way of pricing AI is effective. Right before this call, I was working on a post. I found a company called Salesforge, and on their pricing page, they have a thing that says the human way, the AI way. Right? I haven't seen a company
Uh,
do it like that explicitly. Right? And they have like
uh,
their AI package and their human package. Um, I
huh.
mentioned that just to say, like, that's the type of stuff I'm super interested in. What is the willingness to pay around AI products? What is like, I've had so many conversations in with the Fin Intercom team around that, right? Because they one of the pioneers on like consumption based AI product pricing with
Mhm,
Fin, and also just trying to figure out how do we position this thing? How do we get
mhm,
people like excited, willing to pay? How do we frame it as an add on? Anyways, I
mhm,
digress. But
mhm.
that's been very much the way that I like to think about it and where I've kind of specialized my time over the last like 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. I think when a lot of marketers, they feel like they by the way, I think this and this is like the last tangent as far as AI because it's taking us off the like what we're either of us are experts in. Um, but I think the adoption curve, just and overall usage is just much slower than like anyone lets on. Um, I saw a LinkedIn post this morning that was like it was essentially like Jesse Itzler's like days till you die sort of graph. Essentially, like the population of the world like laid out in like a stippled dots grid, and it represented like every dot represented like 30 some million people, and essentially it was like a perfect block, and it was like the very bottom line were people who have either used a $20 subscription to any LLM, and it was like a minuscule, like under 20% of people on the world have ever even used these tools before. So I think obviously there's a lot of emotions that can be attached with anything that's like could be threatening to people's identities or job or change the way they're currently doing things. But I think just as a whole, it's probably worth just like taking a step back and seeing what other people are doing, learning more, and also like you said, using it as an opportunity to go very niche in the things that you actually like doing, rather than feeling threatened, saying like, "Hey, I just got to be like an AI person now." So, um, anyway, on that note, this has been awesome. I want to play a game with you now and allow you to flex your expertise. I know we talked a little bit about it. I have this set up on a Fig Jam board here, so I'm going to try and share my screen and Um, see how I do this here. So I'm gonna go share.
Yep.
Man, I don't know if this you can maybe inform me. I don't know what S means, but this makes logical sense to me. So S is the best, and
Yeah.
F is the worst. Um, and we have a culmination here on the right. We have a combination of just general website best practices, some of which you've made content on, and
Yep.
also just some screenshots of some home pages slash hero sections that I want you to do a light teardown on, and then I will drag them into the um, according column here based on the data. So, like I said, S is according to data validates this. Marketers must do this right away, and F can correlate to don't ever do this. Like, what the hell is this? Remove this right away, sort of thing, just at a high level.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm,
Obviously,
I'm
we
ready
have
for it.
awesome. Obviously, we have a
I
very professional setup here, so I'm ready to let you flex.
No, let's do it. I play fantasy football, and so I'm very familiar with the S through F tier as I'm getting my weekly updates on the S tier pickups from the waiver wire. Um,
Awesome,
so let's do it. Let's zoom in and we'll chat.
awesome. Let's start with a bit of a softball pitch, so we're not too stimulating the brain. We have Gumroad's hero section here. I want you to talk me through what you're seeing, and then correlate it from a best practices data validation standpoint to one of the tiers we just talked about.
Yeah, for sure. So when we look at the heroes, there's kind of a couple things. So the first thing is from the text component, from the header and the subheader, do I get a clear idea of what this company actually does? So go from $0 to $1. Okay, that could mean a lot of things. That doesn't really tell me anything. Anyone can earn their first dollar online. Okay, that's like a little bit more informative. There's something about selling online. Just start with what you know, see what sticks, and get paid. It's that easy. It's okay. It's not great in my opinion because there's a lot of like replacement costs. When you say anyone can earn $1 online, start with what you know, see what sticks and get paid. I guess the start with what you know indicates it might be selling like informational products. Um, but the differentiation from lots of other things that allow you to sell products is not necessarily like abundantly clear. But like, okay, the general framing I get from this is that it is for entry level products. And I guess that is like the 0 to 1 and first dollar emphasis. So at least there's like some level of affinity. If I come here and I have a $4 million a year business, I don't feel affinity here. So we get a sense of their starting. So let's go to the CTAs. Start selling and then search marketplace is a little interesting. So we do see that 2 CTAs for the vast majority of SaaS companies tends to win. The typical reason is because people have variable levels of intent once an organization reaches any kind of level of maturity. So I always differentiate that company size matters a lot, right? So one of my favorite companies, Sundial has like one CTA that says like demo with founder, right? That makes sense for them as a small, tight organization. That's not going to make sense for like the Stripes of the world, right? So in general, that is that's an okay thing. The idea of like search marketplace versus start selling, I would potentially like modify that language slightly. I don't want to spend like all of our entire time on one of these, so I'm gonna kind of tighten this up and close the loop. But the last thing I'll say is when it comes to CTAs, it all is about expectation to reality matching. So what do I think is going to happen when I do this thing? So you want that to be really, really clear. Search marketplace presumably is to like take someone into the Gumroad marketplace for like things that they might purchase, I would presume, but I don't know that that's like super clear or obvious. The final thing I'll note is that when it comes to visuals, we tend to find that product imagery for B2B SaaS and fintech performs the best in A/B testing directly. This is like seems like not exactly that, like pseudo product image.
Hey, real quick, this episode is brought to us by our friends at Cohatch. I have a quick story to tell you. A while back, I realized I was recreating this bizarre little cave at home where I ate, slept, worked out, all within the same like 300 square feet. I was getting distracted by everything: pets, YouTube, laundry, food. Okay, I'm joking a little bit on the food one, but like the refrigerator was right there, so not really. If you're a founder, a marketer, or a solopreneur, your revenue is directly tied to your effectiveness on the job and your output. You don't notice how much of a role a bad environment plays in your productivity until it starts to sink, and your revenue follows slowly behind it. I had come across Cohatch at a ton of networking and community events as I was right here in Columbus, Ohio, building my business. When I finally invested in a membership, that is when things flipped for me. My ideas felt bigger again. I felt like I was showing up for other people. I felt cleaner, sharper, and honestly, just happier. When you're making a bigger impact in your business, your clients are happier, and your perceived happiness with your own existence, your own business, skyrockets. The best part is that the only distractions at Cohatch are other high-performing people, and that is the good kind of distractions, the kind that leads to partnerships, conversations, and new ideas that propel you forward. If my little environment of doom pattern sounds familiar to you, Cohatch might be the exact shift that you need in your business and your life. They've actually been generous enough to offer you, as a Marketing by Design podcast listener, 2 full free weeks. I would have killed for this when I first started, guys, but they're giving it to you 100% for free. That is why I love Cohatch. That is why I'm a huge advocate of everything they are. They're not giving this deal out anywhere else, so I highly encourage you to head down the description, grab that for yourself, and back to the pod.
I'm guessing that something like a little bit more indicative of like their actual interface would probably perform a little bit better. So anyways, long-winded way, I'm gonna put this in C tier.
See, safe bet. Yeah, I like that. That's expert take right there. Only thing I would say about this one is I'm like, in terms of social proof, there's not a whole lot going on here. I come from more the B2C side, so I'm always interested in social proof. But I feel like if they already have a GitHub logo here, also if they already have a GitHub logo here, I'd love to see this like put somewhere that's more just dialed into from the eye standpoint. So that's where I'm seeing. Also, you made a really good point about the search marketplace. I feel like if I were to search something and it took me to like, you must log in to view the marketplace sort of page, I would be really pissed off, and that would be an instant back for me. So really good points though. So we have that at C. I want to go to like a best practice. So this one right here, strike through pricing on SaaS pricing pages, A through F, or S through F.
Yeah, performs really badly. I'm gonna put it in I'm gonna put it in D or F tier. I don't know if there is a D tier. So
Yeah,
or we'll put it in like I'll say E tier.
E. Okay.
So basically, we've looked at thousands and thousands of examples of people doing strike through pricing, and it loses at an incredibly high percentage in B2B SaaS.
Huh.
And also, even in consumer, we have tests from Peloton, from Spotify, from like tons of different streaming services, e commerce companies. Um, there's probably a lot that we might be able to unpack around like why. I think part of it, I'll say my simplified explanation is that
Mhm.
it is a practice that feels to a buyer almost intrinsically markety or salesy,
Yeah.
right? Like someone
Mhm.
just doesn't trust it. They're like, oh, it used to be $3.99 and now it's 46. The deeper you go with the discounts, the more people I think mistrust. Like you're anchoring, you're
Yeah.
trying to like anchor this high value, but a lot of times what is actually happening is you're losing confidence and trust because you're like, oh, this costs $99. It's normally 1,000. And now people just like are like,
Mm.
oh, this person is like just trying to sell me. Um,
Yeah.
so that's one reason that I think it performs poorly at A/B testing.
Yeah. I think that is like similar to the thing you just said, like countdown, like countdown timers. It's like people know that you're bullshitting when you have like a countdown timer on like anything digital product esque oriented. If people have read Expert Secrets by it's one of the first entrepreneurship books I read. It's Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. Talks all about like webinar and funnel strategies. Anytime I see a timer just anywhere, I'm just like no, like buyers are too aware nowadays for that to work anymore. But yeah, really good point. Now let's go to another homepage here. This one, ProfilePicture.ai. I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about this company, but the visuals intrigue me, so I need your take on it.
Interesting. Never heard of them. Create your profile picture with AI. Okay, that's straightforward enough. I feel like I understand what to do. First of all, this first thing people see when they look at your profile. We use artificial intelligence to attribute as per captures who you are. So,
Humans,
okay,
cats,
first
and
off,
dogs.
their header is great. I feel like that describes it as their subheader. I don't like, I felt like that entire thing was kind of unnecessary. It's like telling me why a profile picture matters. But like, if I'm going and seeking out a tool to help me with my profile picture, like, I'm not really getting a lot of like additional, like, actual context. So then they do
Uh-huh.
check marks. We see that check marks in heroes like this. I actually just pulled this recently because I was looking at ClickFunnels website, who also uses check marks, as well
Uh-huh.
as Pipedrive as well. These tend to lose in testing. So check marks they showed was not a good way of conveying value.
Hmm.
Specifically in this hero section, it doesn't mean that it is not an effective way of showing value in product or lower sections, but specifically in heroes, that's what our data said. Um, but I like that it has like, HD quality, like some actual context. Great gift for someone's birthday. It seems wildly unnecessary. Um, Works for humans, cats, and dogs. I don't know. Bottom line is the header good. Next thing's not great. Sign in with Google's interesting. I did a post actually recently about how I've seen that making a big comeback. I'm not
Uh-huh.
entirely sure why. So to be candid,
Hmm.
now featured on Product Hunt with 133 upvotes. So this is a whole longer conversation. And Andy, I know you've been following me for a while, so you know I have lots of opinions and lots of data that I've looked at around social proof. Here's what I will say around social proof. I'm not telling folks that you should not use social proof, but I think you want to be very, very careful about unintended signaling. What I see a lot of times people do is they use a G2 badge, but that G2 badge is from 2023. And the person's asking themselves, wait a
Mm.
second, like, why aren't you're not the leader now? They use some metric that says, based on 408 reviews, but they're a huge company. And then now I'm saying,
Mhm.
wait, that company, I thought they were like a multi-billion-dollar company. They only have 400 reviews. You want to be
Mhm.
really careful about social proof that is actually making people think that you're smaller, like
Yeah.
you're kicking below your weight class. So to me at least, and I also don't put a ton of value into Product Hunt, so maybe this is a little personal bias. I am highly skeptical of the value or utility raised by saying plus 133 upvotes on Product Hunt. So I personally wouldn't give a lot of stock to that. So I'm going to say this I would also give C tier.
Mm. Interesting. Yep. Yeah, awesome. And as a quick side tangent while I'm putting this in here, have you ever seen a piece of data that um from the database that like objectively shocked you and that you didn't maybe believe or you think would be controversial? If one comes to mind, um, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, the first two things that really surprised me when I joined the company was there's two things I remember them very clearly. It was how often logo bars were losing because I was like, everyone freaking uses logo bars. Like, how could they
Hmm.
possibly be using? It's literally on like 90% of companies' homepage logo bar. That's what everyone does. Those lost at a super high rate. That was very surprising. The second thing is I come from a background of Bonjoro, video companies. I'm very bullish on video. And I saw like hundreds and hundreds of tests of people testing video versus imagery, and imagery kept winning. That also really surprised me. I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, wait, what's going on there?" And there's a lot of nuance to that, which we won't be able to
Hmm.
unpack in the last couple minutes we have here.
Hmm.
For example, like videos that autoplay on like a GIF perform better than like ones that are static and force you to actually click. But I think it's the idea. So much of websites is this expectation to reality. It's this idea that I'm about to click on this thing, and what am I going to get? Am I going to get an explainer video? Am I going to get a cheesy promo? Am I going to get when you don't have that autoplay and you just have that play button with a static image and you have a video, the challenge is people don't know exactly what they're going to get. And you have to think about how people are consuming content today. A lot of times they're on their phone, they're in different places, they don't want sound. So there's a lot of layers
Mm,
to it, but those are the two things that jumped out most to me.
yeah, good answer. Yeah, so I just had to think there's got to be a million things because some people do the same thing. So that's be something that surprises you. This
Yeah.
company, Reflex AI, um, very simple. It looks like, but there's more of a full page effect here. So, what are your thoughts upon seeing this homepage?
Yeah, cool. I can't see the imagery too well. It does look like it's some sort of like product imagery, or at least like derivative of some sort of product imagery potentially. Like these are like reports that you would pull from there. Um,
Mm,
so that's probably fine. Simulation and QA for critical conversations. Okay. Don't know exactly what that means. Also, the other thing I'll say, disclaimer here, we all have different niches, and so just because something doesn't necessarily speak to me, it might speak to a developer or someone who's the right ICP. So I want to clarify that for these
okay.
opinions that I'm dropping here. Um, but helps teams train, perform, and improve the moments that matter most. Um, I don't love the subhead, to be honest. It's vague. Like, so one of the challenges with a lot of content is you want to be really, really careful. I know everyone learned, like, don't talk about features. And instead of talking about features, you should talk about the benefits, right? That was a common thing.
Hmm.
And you mentioned Anthony Pierre and Fletch earlier, and they always attack the same problem. It's actually
Hmm.
the word capability language I actually took from Anthony. I think it's great. But we've also seen our test data show that too, which is that like talk about your capabilities. And if you're going to talk about AI, talk about what AI can do. I just looked at an A/B test that wrapped up for I think it's Databrick or Databricks, not Datadog. Sorry, I get those confused all the time. Anyways, it basically was like they tested whether they should just say the name of their AI, or like the AI that does this very specific thing, like trains agents to do blank blank blank. And
Hmm.
no surprise, I think, to most people listening, the one that was like very clear and explanatory to the actual capability of the AI won, whereas the vague
Hmm.
AI language lost. So, in the same reason, like, I think this is fine. It's like fairly boilerplate. I'd put it, maybe I can't feel like I'm putting everything in C tier. Um, it's okay, maybe somewhere between C and B tier. I think
Right.
more specificity in their subheader would have helped them.
Yeah, that probably wasn't the best one. That marketer played it pretty safe when they were building that one, so it might have been best for this piece of content. Let's go to a better one. Okay, here's a good one. This is a pricing page from Cosmic. I've seen you do a lot of pricing page breakdowns. We talked about strike through pricing. What
Yep.
does Casey see when he sees this one?
Yeah, okay. First they go straight into the plans basically just with a header above. That's good. So you don't want to put a bunch of stuff above your actual plan tiers. That's the first thing. They default to monthly. You typically want to default to yearly and break it down monthly. That's a pretty established best practice now. The vast
Uh,
majority, it's like 80% of the top SaaS companies now do that. So again, you display it by month, but broke it like for an annual contract, and the yearly is the one that you pre-select. In terms of packages here, let's take a look. So there's no subhead. That's the first thing I don't like, meaning there's no
Hmm.
text below. We find that companies like Notion and a handful of others that say, like, this is the best plan for solopreneurs. This is the best plan for small teams or single departments. Something that
Hmm.
allows you to self classify, not a general benefit, but something that's kind of more exacting. So I would
Hmm.
include that. coming soon is very interesting. I don't know if I've actually
Yeah,
ever seen a
gets
coming
lost.
soon
Yeah. Mhm.
pricing plan. We add that to the blank is the only company I've seen do this series. Um, they
Huh.
yeah, so I'm just like gonna take a moment and just read through here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of my challenge that I have with this is that like it's first off, there's a lot of like one of the major problems in pricing page line items is there's a lot of jargon people don't understand, and you don't have any
Mhm.
like tooltip hovers to explain it. I have no idea what public universe is or multiplayer means. Again, maybe like the specific gaming individuals who are like looking at this product that's like intuitive to them. They're like, oh, I of course I know what public universes is. Um,
Mhm.
but I think like defining these things would be somewhat helpful. I mean, overall, this is what I would say. I don't think it's like horrible. They at least it's like somewhat minimalist. I would rather have like a not the best design but somewhat minimalist than like a super messy 40 line items, a bazillion different things I'm trying to digest. Like at least this is like pretty concise. But I
Mhm.
think there's definitely a lot of room for optimization. I'd give it B tier.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I see. I like the simplicity. I just think it looks like shit. I think it's like one of the worst designs we have showcased here today. One thing, do you have any insights around, I know I'm trying to be mindful of my time, but like tooltip pricing versus full on copy for either pricing pages? I know they're very common on pricing pages to have kind of a tooltip or hover interaction versus like expanding copy. Which do you prefer as a user versus what do you see any data validating there, whether on pricing pages or just on like home pages?
Yeah, I think tooltips, we have seen certain people test into tooltips and they can be effective for certain brands. I also think having like text below, like if you don't have a lot of line items, like if you have say like 4 line items, then having like the header of it and then having like a short like one sentence below that like extrapolates or explains it without the hover, I think that also can perform well. So a couple different
Hmm.
variations.
Interesting. All right, let's go to another. Um, this is a good one. So again, we're stripping a lot of context here, but exit intent pop-ups, just as a whole. So thoughts.
I exit intent pop-ups are not common today. So first off, very, very few
Uh,
companies I've ever seen, and I spend a lot of time on websites, do exit intent pop-ups. I would personally, so this is Casey opinion, not data opinion from Do at Work, because I honestly don't know
mhm,
of any tests I've looked at around this. So this is just purely personal opinion. I would say I would
mhm,
assume they would perform poorly, that they're like kind of intrusive and that people don't like them. In general, pop-ups perform badly. So like going outside of exit intent, overall they perform badly. I was just on a call with the head of marketing for a large organization that like swore by them. And he's like, you guys are all wrong. They kill it for us. So, there's always
mhm.
exceptions. I'm not saying that every company is the same, but in general, I would put them low. I'd put them D, E tier.
Okay, there we go. We're getting some down here. At least we're getting some opinions here. I think for like e-commerce, there's a lot of use cases, but then that goes like back into the bigger marketing picture rather than just being website centric. So again, it's hard to. This is like what all website takes are is constraining context to such a limited window, which is what we're doing here. So um,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about this, but G2 Capterra badge walls. Co- Again, agnostic of context as to where they're appearing. I know they're probably on conversion pages. They're a bit of a no-no because they can link out to potentially like a directory of competitors, which is not a good idea. But just say Capterra G2 badge walls on a homepage.
Yeah, in general, I'm like fairly skeptical of badges. I think that obviously if you don't link them out, obviously there's ways you can do it better or ways you can do it worse, right? Um, I think third party validation can have some value. I think there's a lot of concern about the impartiality of those badges. You tend to find that companies that invest a lot of money in the SaaS world are more bullish about G2 or Capterra because they're spending $40,000 a year. And what
Mhm,
consumers, maybe even some of the listeners, might not know is that there is a large amount of payment that occurs within that infrastructure online. Um, so I personally have seen them perform pretty poorly. Do I think that there might be some applications or ways that they could perform better than others? Yes. but I personally would not lean super heavy into that as a primary conversion mechanism.
Hmm. Awesome. So what are we ranking that?
I'll put that as a C tier.
Okay, cool. All right, let's do two more here. Um, we got to do this one. I want to hear your take on this. So this is PostHog's homepage. Obviously, something we have not talked about is like the role brand plays in all this stuff. And again, it's like that's like emotional, touchy feely stuff that does not play a role in a lot of marketing contexts. But I would say this is a very brand centric website. But just from a, like a website best practices standpoint, what are we, what are we seeing on PostHog's homepage?
Yeah, I love PostHog. It's
Yeah.
funny. I actually sent a message over to the PostHog team recently because I highlight their stuff so much, and I said, "Hey, if you guys could share some like actual data, I would love to do a post that says like, do creative websites actually convert, and like get
Hmm.
into the fact of like, does this stuff actually work?" Now, granted, there could be some bias. Like, if PostHog's website is low performing, they probably aren't going to hop on a call with me and tell me how their website sucks. But in
Yeah.
general, look, PostHog is memorable, right? PostHog has a very specific tone. Is every aspect of their UI optimized? When I talk to big established marketing teams, they often are very critical of PostHog. They're like, "Yeah,
Uh-huh.
this looks fun, but it sucks." And I get it. Like they're basically saying that like the navigation, it's not intuitive for how people get through.
Mhm.
I kind of think of it like I understand that critique, and I think to some degree that critique is fair. But again, my bias is I'm a distribution guy. That I've kind of told people that that's my
Mhm.
and websites like PostHog, they get tons of distribution of people sharing, people highlighting, people relinking to them, people like pushing folks to them because they are a very memorable website. Um, I also think through examples like a good example with PostHog is their competitor comparison pages. I did this whole thing. I'll not go too off the rails here, but um,
Uh-huh.
I looked at probably 150 comparison pages because I hate comparison pages. I find they're always so biased. Companies like lie through their teeth. It's like we do everything. Our competitors suck. Like it's horrible. PostHog, here's what they did, which I love, and I give them props for doing this. They took direct quotes from the company about how the company described themselves, the competitor of PostHog, and then they went and they grabbed actual real positive reviews and critical reviews as well, but they grabbed real positive reviews, not like the fake ones where it's like, this is great if you're an enterprise organization with over 20,000 employees and tons of money to spend on expensive consultants, right? Where it's like
Yeah.
a fake positive. It was like actual people talking about like, hey, I use Amplitude and it's really good for this, this, and this. I found that when I read that, I trusted everything they said about PostHog further down the page so much more because they actually gave their competitors flowers. So I'm
Yeah.
getting a little bit off the base, but what I'd say is creative websites. I like it. I like things that are memorable. I think it gives them built-in distribution. Do I think it's the most intuitive UI experience? No, I don't. But I think that
Yeah.
it's so out there and creative that I think that overpowers some of the design weaknesses. I give them A tier.
Nice. Yeah, I love that, dude. You're like we're seeing both sides of like your expertise versus your taste. So that's why I wanted to
Yeah,
bring that up. I love that. I personally do like it a lot too because I'm intuitive when it comes to like I'm actually navigating websites, but I think it would be like the ultimate marketing home run for them to share like what you said. What is because they're a website analytics performance company, you know, like it would be such a good thing for them to say like, hey, all you guys talk trash about our website, but using like our data and our process, this is how our website's actually performing and it's good.
I'm
That
a,
would be a home
I'm
run
gonna
for
try to
them,
get
I
I'm
think.
gonna try to get it for you guys.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to get the info.
Aw, man of the people. Man of the people. All right, let's do one more. I want to end on a funny one. Let's do this one.
Um, where do you even start? Okay, I'll try to start with okay, so they have like a double eyebrow. They don't even have just an eyebrow, they have a double eyebrow. Or I guess that's like kind of their example of a banner, except for they also have a banner at the top. Okay, so yeah, first thing, insanely busy, like way too busy. There's no
Mhm.
possible way you could convince me that this is the amount of things that you want to have happening because it's like so distracting to your eye. But I'll try to dissect the pieces. Top banners tend to perform poorly. If you're going to use a top banner, what we found is a top banner that's tied to a very specific affinity or benefit does perform better, right? So, for example, a good example is like Brex just got acquired by Capital One, and they ran a banner that's like, see how this acquisition helps you as a startup. I think that actually piques interest. Like, if I'm a startup, I don't care that they got acquired. I don't care they raised $100 million. I don't care. Like, all of those are focused on the company. Focus on me, the consumer. What does this benefit? Oh, it helps startups. Okay, now I might want to know why. But even with that, be a little bit careful because you're taking clicks and you're moving them somewhere that is not like a start a trial, get in contact, primary path. So in general, banners perform poorly. Okay, what about eyebrows? So eyebrows are typically for like classifications. This is above your header, right? So the first thing it says, we just upgraded our headshot quality. That is like absolutely not. Like what that's like what that is like a worthless statement to me. Like I have no idea what that even that like just cut that out entirely. The next one is more of the standard, the number one AI headshot generator for professional headshots. At least it's like a classification. I still don't think it's super necessary if your header and your subheader are strong. There's a company called Synthesia that did like an interesting take where they had it like as a header, but when you hovered over, there was like a quote from an enterprise company, and they kind of used it as a way to like carve out a category a little bit more specifically. I think there can be some utility there, but a lot of eyebrows lose in testing, just so people know. Okay. Professional business headshots without a physical photo shoot. Okay, cool. Like that's fine. Like I understand what that is. Get professional headshots in minutes with an AI headshot generator. Upload photos, pick your style, receive 100 headshots. So what's kind of crazy about this is like their header and their subheader is actually not that bad. Like it like describes what they do. It gives the steps. Like if they just got rid of the banner, got rid of both of those eyebrows, like made that text quite a bit larger, minimize, you don't need to have like, there's so much imagery going on. Just pick a side, have the imagery like everyone else on your say right. They don't need to make it this busy. I think having the images on but like foiled like this and essentially showing the exact same thing, which is an image being processed, like I don't understand why they're distracting my eye in that way. So then it says create your headshots now. Again, process level clarity. Maybe that's good, but what are you going to make me do? Do I need to download an app? Do I need to get a trial? Like what are the steps? When I click on that, I don't know exactly. Right? So you need to be careful. There was a famous example of a test from Apple we looked at where they said start listening versus start a trial. And you might intrinsically guess, well, start listening is better. That's the benefit. But it actually lost and start a trial won. And the reason was when people clicked on the start listening, it took them to a trial window where they had to sign up for a trial before they could start listening. Right? So again, process level clarity, they were tricked. So just take that one for what it's worth. They then say they have Trustpilot with 4.5 stars, and then 14 million headshots created for 86,000 customers. Again, it's fine, but I think a thing to think about. I actually talked with this super fascinating guy who was like a biologist PhD, and he talked to me about cost signaling in the animal community as a segue or connector to social proof here. And he basically said, look, the harder it is to fake, or the easier it is to fake, the more that lots of people will do it, right? Like when you look at deer, they have these huge or these big antlers, right, on an elk. That is a very, very hard thing to fake. So when they come in, you either have the big horns or you don't have the big horns, right? It is a challenging thing to replicate. With your social proof, use that lens. You've heard me be a little bit critical of badges. You've heard me be a little bit critical maybe of logos and all these other things. Part of it is anyone can go slap. I can go make a website today and I can say, hey, here's all my customers. I work with the NFL, the MLB. Like I can just slap those logos on. I can just bold face lie to you, right? How are you going to validate it? Most logo bars are just passive things. People have no idea. Or I can say, we work with State Farm. In actuality, I work with one individual contractor that is a 2-person company in North Dakota that pays me $100 a year, but I work with State Farm. Right? Like people need context and they need affinity and they need trust. So how do you get around that? Number one, think of things that are harder to fake. So if you have OpenAI's head of product, you have a video of them talking. Well, shit, that's pretty good, right? Like it's probably not fake. I can look up who the head of product at OpenAI is and you have a video of them talking. That's probably pretty solid. Secondarily, link it to a case study or provide some specific context. So like Clay as an
Mhm.
example, and now
Yeah.
like hundreds of companies have copied Clay since then, but it's a simple thing. On their logo bar, they link out to a case study so you can get specific context. Stripe,
Mhm.
as another example, on their section, they have an ability where like they'll say we work with BMW, but they'll say we work with 150 plus branches of BMW. BMW uses these specific products of ours. They provide context. So think through that context and that affinity in that kind of setting. I think that makes sense. And similarly, just sorry to get back to this for a moment, it says as
Mhm.
seen by these news outlets, but those actually don't look clickable. Maybe it's my screen, I can't tell, but they're like grayed out. So if you're
Mhm.
going to include that you're featured on CNN, awesome. That's super cool. Actually link me to it though. If you don't link, same problem. Like, how can I trust? I just don't like that's
Yeah.
something that does not build a lot of confidence. So
Mhm.
overall, this one's bad. It's a D. D or an E.
D. Awesome. Dude, you absolutely cooked there. That's a good one to end on. We've got the full spectrum here. We got some good ones. We had some good brand plays, obviously some best practices. And again, doing the best we can without having all the context, which dude, you that
And
was
I
awesome. Go ahead.
love. I'll leave people just in case people want some inspiration. They want some Casey opinions. Check out the site Whisperflow. Huge fan of Whisperflow. Creative, informative, showcases the product, run some cool experiments. They're awesome. Sundial is another one. Really clean design, interactive, like a lot of best practices. So if folks are looking at this like Casey's just what is Casey actually like, or what does he think is actually solid? You can go check out. Those are two solid examples that would hit that AS tier
Mhm.
level.
Yeah. That and PostHog. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. But dude, that was awesome. I know we ran a little bit long, but thank you for hanging with me. That was that was a lot of fun. I know, but super professional setup there. So I appreciate you hanging with me and flexing your expertise though. If listeners like what they hear, they want to check out that newsletter, they want to follow you on LinkedIn. Where should they go first?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is always a great first hub. Just Casey Hill, the person who's talking about websites pretty much in all my content. You can follow me there. That's a great place. I post probably 5 times a week, 6 times a week. And then I have the Do What Works newsletter that you can see linked directly from there. So if you find that content interesting, but you want deeper dives, you want more data, you want more analysis, and you also maybe want some collateral to help you get buy-in. Someone messaged me recently, which I thought was really cool. They said, hey, I love that post you did, but I actually sent your newsletter to our executive team because it had a bunch of test data to try to justify us making that change. So that's pretty cool. If you're looking to like be like, hey, here's 4 top SaaS companies that tested this and they got this result, that might give you a little bit of justification or juice to try to make some of those changes and get people bought in. So feel free to opt into the
Mhm.
newsletter and then kind of pull those tests from that to justify that for you guys.